Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. I have an audio exclusive solo episode for you today. It's December. It's that time of year that we reflect, and what a year it has been. My goal for Vet Life Reimagined was to share the stories of people from the profession to show the possibilities in veterinary medicine. And I want you to understand, yes, their career journey, but to understand the human aspect of it, to learn what's important to them and how they're living that special adventure where vet med has a large part to play. For a long time, I could tell people who worked around animals were special, but I think it's through this podcast that I continue to fall more and more in love with the people of veterinary medicine. I happened to be at a podcaster meetup here in Savannah just a couple of weeks ago, and they had talked about the importance of the host of a podcast to be vulnerable and allow listeners to get to know them. So I thought I could share some personal events that have happened over this pretty transformative year. So I hope you enjoy some of my stories from the year. They really do show some pretty life-changing things that have happened for me, both in life and career. So the year started in January, obviously. The big conference at the beginning of the year is VMX. And so this was a pretty big milestone for the year, an interesting way to start. And one of the reasons why it was a big milestone for me this year was that I was going into this conference knowing that I needed a change. I needed a job change. And so I had been struggling in a career or in a place of work. And even though I was getting frustrated in different aspects of my job, and I did try to figure out, what part do I play in this? How can I change? Things were not getting better. And what I found was that I was becoming a person I didn't want to be. And I wanted to go into those details just in case you're going through that same thing. If you're starting to find that you are not being the person you want to be, then that's a big red flag. And it's time to sit down and figure out what to do to make that better. So I was going into VMX trying to plan a lot. I was arranging to meet people before I went, thinking about different events that were going on. And of course, this was motivated. One, I was looking for a job. Two, I always think about this podcast. So I was looking for potential connections for the podcast. And so it was packed. I met so many people. I came out of that with a lot of great podcast interviews and connections. And then something that really changed my life forever and set the stage for the rest of the year. And so my husband had come with me on this conference. We don't live very far away from Orlando. We live in Savannah. It's a nice 4-hour drive. And so he'd come with me. We're both remote workers. So he stayed in the hotel and worked, and then we hung out and spent some time in Orlando. It's a fun place to be. And so I had some signs that I might be pregnant. And so on our way back, even though my husband was like, we'll wait till we get back home and we'll do a pregnancy check then, he all of a sudden couldn't wait any longer. So we stopped in a CVS. And what do you know? I found out I was pregnant right there at VMX. So we had been trying for a little while, and it finally happened. And so we were elated and shocked because it had taken so long to get to that point. But really, that was the start of my year. Interesting to be looking for a new job and then finding out you're pregnant. So you're having to think about those things. And anytime I did talk with somebody, of course, we waited to tell people. We didn't tell people right then and there. But later on, when I was doing more interviews later in Q1 and early Q2, I wanted to be very open and transparent, and lots of stories I could probably tell of interviewing in different places. But I found one that seemed to fit well, and that I changed jobs in April. So I now work for Whitebridge Pet Brands, which you might have seen them in the news. They just got purchased by General Mills, so that's a whole another story that we won't go into. But a lot of changes there in my career. And also along this way, I was studying for a board exam. I was a nutrition resident many years ago back at the University of Missouri. I finished my residency in 2017. And in case you're listening to this at a different time, this is 2024. And so it had been a little while. Also a very long story of how it took so long to get to this point. And I did not pass my boards the year before. So I was sitting again and studying. I had one amazing study buddy, and we had a great group of mentors who supported us this year, boarded nutritionist who helped us do study sessions. We met every week. And when it came to sitting for the board exam, which is in June, it's right before the ACBIM conference, I came out of the exam. I was a little nervous. But of course, I go off to the ACBIM conference. I am the president of AAVN, the nutrition organization. So I was emceeing that symposium while being pregnant. And yeah, so later I do find out that I passed. So that's great. So here I am. I've changed jobs in April, and now I'm a boarded nutritionist. And so there's a lot of changes for my career. And while I decided to sit for my board exams after all this time, it wasn't that not being boarded was keeping me from going after jobs or things I wanted in my career. But I did know that having those letters after my name would help me in my career. So I did decide to go ahead and sit, and now I can have those letters after my name, and we can see what that brings. So we'll see how maybe that will help me get more speaking opportunities or other things in my career along the way. And then, of course, I'm pregnant, and my husband has a daughter, so I have been a step parent, but it's very different, and being pregnant is a whole another ballgame. But what I really loved about being pregnant, what surprised me, was that when I did tell somebody that I was having a baby, the look that I got from people was extremely special. People who had children or grandchildren, they immediately go back to those days when they had their baby. And it is just this beautiful, warm joy that you can just see spread over their face. And seeing the joy part was beautiful, but just having this unique connection was something I hadn't really thought about going through pregnancy. And I think connection is huge. It is definitely a theme that I want to focus on next year, because I think that in a world of a lot of change, connection is what gets us through. I think we're fortunate to be in a profession that has a very strong connection. I always call it's a little big industry, because you always can find probably someone who knows someone who knows someone, those few degrees of connection. And I think that is special. Not only do we have special people in this industry, people who are passionate and compassionate and all the wonderful things that I continue to find interviewing people in this podcast, which is why this podcast is one of my favorite things I get to do. That connection piece is something we cannot forget. And I think that is the way that we are going to not only get through challenges, but we will lead the profession through change into a very beautiful place if we can remember that. And so being able to see that through being pregnant was very special. And then, of course, in September, I did give birth to my daughter, Abigail. And so right now she is about 10 weeks old. And I have always been a person to think about the future, because I'm a person of possibilities. And I was one of those kids who she wanted to be a veterinarian from a very young age. And so you have this plan and you put actions into making this plan come to fruition to get to that future. But there is something very different about having kids. And it's like you see so much of the future, and I get excited to think about all the things I get to do with her and show the world to her. Because the other thing that I hope that we can embrace is this mindset of curiosity. It was a word that was big in the podcast at the very beginning, being curious about opportunities, being curious about what the future could bring. And I hope that I can raise a daughter who is extremely curious and kind. Those are the two things that are my big focus for teaching her. Because I think when you have those two things, the world of possibilities really is endless. You're curious, you're open to seeing them, and you're kind, so you're hopefully building these human connections that will not only be rewarding just purely through the blessing of being connected with other human beings, but that connection can lead to other things in the future. And if you listen to the podcast episodes, you'll hear that. You'll hear that mentors or connections along the way or how people got to where they are. So listen to that next time. And it was kind of funny. I'll tell this story that happened. It's been a few weeks now, but my husband and I went to Longhorn for lunch, and he had gone to the bathroom and was coming back, and he looked a little upset. I was like, what's wrong? And he said he passed a booth, and they were talking about the teenage mother and how the grandfather was taking them to lunch. And we were the only couple with a baby in the restaurant. And so unless they were talking about some other people that they knew that weren't at the restaurant, they were talking about us. And so I apparently was this teenage mother that they were seeing. And this is not the first time that I have been mistaken for being a lot younger than I am. And I feel bad every time from my husband, who has to be in that situation. And normally it's actually has been quite annoying for me in the past. But when you've just had a baby and you are feeling old and unattractive and someone thinks you're a teenager, I just thought that was funny. And I was like, I'll take it. It's probably because I was sleep deprived and maybe didn't have enough eye makeup on or something. But anyway, I was in the car. I don't know if it was that day or maybe later. I was texting my dad and I told him about the incident. And in jest, I was like, I still got it, that I looked young. And his response was, well, I hope that wasn't an insult. And my response back to him was, life is open to much interpretation. Might as well choose the optimistic one. So I wanted to share that. And I just thought it was funny. And it just showed me as being kind of an optimistic person. Thank goodness, despite being sleep deprived, I can still have some optimism. But I want you to make sure that you do understand that you have choice in how we react to things. I think there's a lot that has been going on this year. I think it's kind of setting up for a lot of questions about the future, which is why I'm in a few episodes going to bring on quite a few experts from around the veterinary industry. A lot of them have been featured guests on the podcast, and I'm going to ask them to tell us their predictions for 2025. What do they see in the future for the veterinary profession? I'm really excited to put these together. But I do think we've kind of been set up for a lot of questions for the future. There's a lot going on in the world on a political standpoint. Technology is changing so fast. And I see that the veterinary industry is faster to change, but we're still a lot slower than how AI and technology are evolving. And so I think that there's just going to be a lot in the future. And being me, I'm excited for it. I know that that's not always the mindset that people take. And that's also fair too, to be cautiously optimistic. But again, know that we do have the ability to choose how we respond to things. I want you to feel empowered to make choices that take your personal values into account. Being a mother now, man, do I think about the future. I don't know exactly my ideal career at this point or my ideal job. Quite honestly, I would love to do more with this podcast, and I kind of hope to do so. There's some things that might be occurring soon that might set that up for us to do a lot of new things going forward. And just take this opportunity to thank you for listening and to be a part of this creation that it is kind of like another baby. It's hard to compare to Abigail, but I also adore it. I also think about the future for it and want to do it with you. I definitely don't want to do that alone. So I would love your thoughts. There's an opportunity to send a text message below. It's a one-way text message. You can find it in the show note descriptions below. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Last name is Sprinkle. There's not too many Sprinkles, I don't think, out there. So please find me, connect, reach out, tell me what you like, what you would like to potentially see in the podcast. But I think that us being able to be open and curious, and a couple other things, if I had to give any advice to people who were going to go through pregnancy, and honestly, it's advice that I think applies to all aspects of life, is the ability to be flexible and adaptable. I knew that anything can happen in pregnancy. Anything can happen with the birth plan. Anything can happen with, life. We don't always have control, but we do have choices. And I wanted to choose to have the ability to kind of go with the flow a bit. Yes, it was good to read a few things, have an idea of what would be ideal, but at the same time, I set myself up for anything can happen, and you make the best choice for you in the moment with the information that you're given. And I think that was absolutely the thing that got me through this pregnancy so well. I hope it is the thing that gets me through parenthood, being adaptable and listening, and like I said, go with the flow. And I think I heard a podcast not too long ago about, I think it's called the adaptability quotient. And they say that is the number one characteristic for success. And so I think if we can combine all of these things that I've talked about, that curiosity, the empowerment to make choices, the ability to be flexible and adaptable, I think that's going to get you really far. So listen, connect, see what's out there, what's possible, be open to what that interpretation of what you see might be. And I think you will go far. I think we can go far together. And that's what I want. I want to go together. So as I wrap up this very personal episode, I want to thank you again. Whether you're a student, been in the industry for a while, maybe you're considering this field, I want you to remember that our journeys are never linear. Each challenge, each milestone, each unexpected turn is an opportunity for growth. So as we start this new year, remember that flexibility, patience, personal grace, community connection. What are your things that you're wanting to focus on this year? I know some people pick one word for the year. So maybe it is connection. Maybe it is personal grace. I know that's 2 words, but they count. How can I support you this year? You have definitely supported me so far in this journey. We are reaching our year 3 of this podcast in 2025 on April 1st. So that's a big deal. Thank you for being part of this journey. If you're newer to the podcast, welcome. Buckle in. It's a fun ride. So what can you do to support? You can definitely do a 5-star rating and review. That does help this podcast get some reach. But I think also tell someone about it. Connect. Give me your thoughts. Enjoy the episodes that show the diversity of the possibilities in our career. And hopefully that helps you feel connected that despite how different our careers can look, we're still vet med. We are connected to this broader narrative. And so I hope you continue to feel inspired. I hope you are excited looking towards the future for 2025. And so stick around. I have some cool things coming. The next episode is definitely an empowering story. So I hope you stay tuned. It is a veterinary technician. Last week we had a relief veterinarian. And next week we're going to have a relief veterinary technician. Very, very cool story. So again, I hope you stay, subscribe. That definitely helps. And hope you have a fantastic 2025. And if you're going to be a VMX, reach out, let me know. Let's connect. And until next time, take care.